Good evening and welcome to today's Tropics for July 5th, 2021. Please note, I'm not a meteorologist and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storm I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult the National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm looking at Tropical Storm Elsa. So it is moving slowly northward on Cuba, or over Cuba, after it made landfall earlier today around 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And it is slowly kind of drifting north, but there are some indications that it should get to the Florida Straits within the next few hours. And we do have our recon plane actually inbound to this area. It won't arrive in time, or even close to being in time for this video, but we'll know a bit more about what's going on with Elsa once it arrives. So it's starting to look a little bit better now on satellite imagery. You've got the mid-level low over probably closer to northern Cuba now, and it does seem that the low-level center is a bit more aligned, and it's definitely more healthy looking than it has over the past few days, and that is due to a bit of a change in the kind of pattern that has been around with regards to shear. So let's take a look at the infrared imagery. It's not the most impressive. There's some decently cold convection, but it's a little on the warmer side, but it's over, or generally over the center, or there's some of it. So it's healthier looking than yesterday. You've got this kind of convergent sort of blob where you got the trade winds from the Caribbean kind of interacting with the more northerly or even westerly flow that's from Elsa itself. And so that low-level convergence is allowing for some deep convection in that area. Looking at the water vapor imagery here, you can see what's kind of changing with Elsa and its kind of environmental pattern. Here's an upper trough that's digging down into the Gulf, and this is what's kind of caused it to slow down and what's eroded the ridge and why it's turning more north rather than keeping on its kind of west-northwest track, and that is the upper trough. And then there's a pretty healthy upper anticyclone that Elsa has had for quite a few days. But if you notice one thing is that this westerly flow out of that upper trough here is kind of constricting the western end of the upper anticyclone. So you've got kind of a slightly constricted outflow. It's nothing too bad for now. It's not going to shear the convection off, but it's kind of a preview to the more southwesterly flow that Elsa will have to deal with in the Gulf. You also notice this dry air off to that or to the west of it, and this is going to be it's going to try to advect into Elsa in the southwesterly upper level wind flow, and that might interrupt the storm. So we'll have to see if that does end up happening. Again, we don't have a recon. So that means we don't quite have a sure idea of what is going on in the center, or where the center even is. But we do have some radar imagery from both Casablanca in Cuba and Key West in Florida. So Key West here, this radar is very far, and it sees a mid-level low here. And you can see it was kind of stuck around here down kind of in this little bay area here, but it seems that it's starting to translate a bit further north now as it kind of moves its way into the Florida Straits here. And yeah, it's a little hard to tell, but it seems that somewhere around here, so it is starting to move a bit more north, and it is again on the way to the Florida Straits, and we'll see what it does over water. But you see it's starting to move north, and given what we know about the mid-level center here, the radar out of Cuba, it's much closer to the low level, or to the actual storm. So the beam is going to go way up into the mid-level center instead. It's going to see more of the low-level structure of the storm. And from what I can tell in this loop here, it does seem that there's generally low-level circulation in the same general area of the mid-level center. So it seems that land interaction with Cuba has actually kind of helped it because it took more of a track where it just missed all of the mountains, and instead it was kind of over some low-lying land where the friction could actually sort of help the organization of the storm. So since Elsa seems to have actually organized a bit better as this has happened, and also as the mid-level shear has kind of started to back off a little, it seems that the uh, model solutions that we've seen for a stronger storm in the Gulf seem to be more likely, and that's why we're seeing trends in that direction at this point. So let's take a look at the steering. So you could see this area, or this upper trough here that I was talking about earlier. So this is why it's going to eventually turn eastward into Florida later, and that's because it's eroded the ridge here. And in general, it's a pretty straightforward pattern. But one kind of thing to note is if you look at the flow, it's a pretty classic sort of example of where the ridge is stronger at the low levels, and where the kind of troughing, if there's a lot more of that in the upper levels, since it's a cold core feature. So if you look at the upper levels here, there's a decent eastward flow here, but in the low levels, there's more so southeasterly flow. So that means if you've got a stronger storm that can kind of feel that steering further up, then that means it will end up traveling a bit more east. So the models have trended stronger and east, so it's consistent with what we'd expect for the steering here. This also means that the mid-level shear at this point isn't actually as big an issue for the storm, because it's mostly the upper level shear that will be a detrimental influence on it. So let's take a look at the actual conditions right now, over especially with regards to shear. And there is a bit of that directional mid-level shear here. You got the northwest or northeasterly winds in the mid-levels, southeasterly winds at the low levels, but it's not as strong, and that seems to be why Elsa has been able to get organized and likely been able to kind of get stacked after a few days of where it couldn't. But you can see there's actually a decent amount of shear further up from that southwesterly wind aloft, so that might try to tilt it. And if that does happen, probably going to end up seeing a weaker storm. Now, again, the models seem to be keeping it stacked, and so now the GFS is now saying that it will be a bit below 1,000 millibars. This says 997. It kind of takes it down here, but doesn't get any stronger. So it's a pretty decent tropical storm. It's not quite a hurricane, but it's getting up there, and you can see it's a decent bit closer to the Florida coast than the National Hurricane Center track. So that would mean some more impacts for the west coast of Florida. So if we do have a stronger trend, then you should be probably watching a bit closer if you are in the west coast of Florida, because you might see some more impacts as that kind of core of the storm is closer than expected. And one big thing to note, as a result of the stronger trend, instead of kind of just getting some southwesterly wind aloft and maybe a bit of divergence, it seems that there might be enough convection generated from a stronger low that's able to kind of get this area of upper anticyclonic flow slightly over the center. That's still kind of a bit of a sheared profile, since there is that southwesterly wind aloft. But there is a decent bit of divergence aloft, so that might be one of these situations where you see kind of getting together. It's an asymmetric storm, but it's able to get together because of that upper level divergence, which is forcing some convection over it. So I'll have to see how that works out. But again, there is that there's that drier air to the southwest of it, so that could punch into the core and weaken it. But if it doesn't, it still means that the west side will be kind of drier, and we'll see kind of this big fetch of moisture on the east. So it will be an east-weighted storm, but it might actually have a core instead of just being kind of much sloppier east-weighted rainstorm. Now let's look at the H-Worth model here. Uh, Basically, sort of in tune with the GFS, but a bit slower and a bit stronger. It takes it up to almost borderline hurricane strength, and again, you'll notice that at this point it is closer to the coast than would be expected at this latitude from the National Hurricane Center forecast. So, if we do end up seeing this stronger trend verify, then the National Hurricane Center might have to kind of move a track a little east, and that might again cause some additional impacts for the coast or west coast of Florida. Again, this kind of confirms that there is that dry air lurking in the southwest. So this isn't going to be a very symmetrical storm. There's still going to be that moister air to the east and an east-weighted storm, but instead it might have an actual sort of core, or at least something like convection wrapping up shear rather than it just kind of getting all sheared to the northeast. Uh, so we'll watch these trends and see if it kind of trends back, or whether we're in for a stronger storm near the Gulf Coast. I think that recon mission that's flying down to the storm, that's not going to be there for a little while, but once we get some observations from there, I think we'll have a better idea of what the storm is looking like and what we could be expecting as it emerges into the Florida Straits and the Gulf. So let's take a look at the official National Hurricane Center track forecast for it. And again, you can see it's expected to travel more and more northward, and then eventually turning northeastward. Uh, and yeah, that it's relatively high confidence that it will do that. We might have to see, or we might end up seeing some slight east shifts if this stronger trend verifies. But generally, the National Hurricane Center agrees that even though the environment might be a little marginal, it'll be able to strengthen a little as it gets up under the Gulf and eventually landfalls around the Big Bend area of Florida. We still have some leftover tropical storm warnings for Cuba as it's over the storm or over the island right now. And the west coast of Florida here has a large area of those tropical storm warnings and watches, as Elsa is expected to affect this area. But along with the winds, that kind of moist stretch of air is going to cause heavy rain and flooding, especially for the west coast of Florida. So potential flooding is a risk. There's also again those higher winds and possibility for tornadoes, especially when you have a slightly shear tropical cyclone. Tornadoes are a risk, so definitely keep your eyes on the flooding and the tornado risk alongside the risks presented by the actual wind. Otherwise, there isn't a whole lot to talk about in the Atlantic or with Elsa itself at this moment. So that's it for tonight. And if you have any questions or comments about my video, please let me know. Thanks for watching.